Imagine being 9 years old, and your entire village decides you're dangerous. Not just naughty, not just strange dangerous. They tie your hands, march you 20 miles across frozen tundra in the dead of winter, and leave you at that. They call you underground fire because you keep screaming that there's warmth beneath the earth, that the ground itself is alive and burning to help you. They laugh, they spit, they say you're insane. And then they walk away, leaving you and the howling Arctic wind completely alone. Everyone thinks that's the end of your story, that you'll be dead by morning. But hold on tight, because what happens over the next 72 hours is so unthinkable, so impossible that when those same villagers finally come back to bury your body, they find something that makes grown men drop to their knees and cry in the snow. This is the true story of underground fire. And the night she and her little sister played barefoot at 40 degrees below zero. Part 1. Strange, dark, and mysterious. Delivered in story mode. Her real name was Ayla Naklanuk, 9 years old. Born under the faint green shimmer of the northern lights in the tiny Inupiaq village of Kivalina, Alaska, population 112 souls clinging to a sandspit between the Chukchi Sea and the frozen tundra. Ella had eyes the color of glacier melt, pale blue, almost white, and from the time she could talk she insisted the ground was warm. Not just warm. Hot, burning, alive. She would lie flat on the permafrost in January, cheek pressed to the ice, and whisper, "I hear it breathing." Her mother tried to hush her. Her grandmother burned sweetgrass and prayed over her. But nothing stopped the dreams. Every single night Ayla woke screaming that the earth had opened its mouth and was singing to her with flames. She drew pictures on sealskin with charcoal, rivers of fire deep underground, glowing red hands reaching up through cracks in the ice, beckoning her down. The elders said she was touched by Iglarak, an evil spirit that lives beneath the world and tries to drag children into the lava. They said she would bring the village bad luck, that the sea ice would break early, that the caribou would vanish forever if she stayed. And then one night in February 1968, the dreams stopped being dreams. Ayla bolted upright in her caribou skin. Sleeping bag at 3 a.m., sweat freezing on her forehead even though the cabin was -20 inside. She shook her mother so hard the woman's teeth chattered. "It's time," Ayla whispered, voice trembling with absolute certainty. "The fire wants me now. It's ready." Her mother slapped her across the face, hard, told her to stop, cursing the family. But Ayla just smiled this eerie, calm smile, and walked straight out the door into the blizzard wearing nothing but her nightdress. They found her 3 hours later 2 miles from the village, barefoot, standing in a perfect circle of melted snow 20 feet across. Steam rose from the ground like breath. The permafrost around her feet was black and wet as if summer had arrived in that one spot. In her hand she clutched a fistful of warm rocks that glowed faintly orange in the dark. The men who found her said the heat coming off those stones made their gloves smoke. That was the final straw. 2 days later, the entire village council met in the schoolhouse. The wind screamed against the walls like it wanted in. They voted unanimously. Ayla Naklanuk had to go. They couldn't kill her. That would bring an even worse curse, but they could exile her. So they sewed a sealskin parka for her, gave her 1 box of wind matches, 1 tin cup, and 1 frozen seal flipper for food. Then 6 of the strongest men tied her wrists with walrus hide rope, loaded her onto a dog's-old, and drove her 23 miles inland to the abandoned Lucky Friday gold mine, an enormous black hole in the earth that had been boarded up since 1942. Wind chill -72. When they reached the mine, the men cut her ropes, shoved her toward the entrance, and told her never to come back. One of them, her own Uncle Jonah, couldn't even look at her. He just turned the dogs around and cracked the whip so hard the lead dog yelped. Within minutes, the sled was gone, swallowed by whiteout. Ayla stood alone at the mouth of the mine. Snow stung her face like shotgun pellets. Her breath froze into ice beads before it left her lips. She stared down the long, dark tunnel that slanted into the bowels of the earth, boards rotting, timbers sagging. She wasn't afraid. She whispered to the darkness, "I'm home." Then she stepped inside. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees the moment she crossed the threshold. Her eyelashes froze together. The seal flipper in her pocket turned to stone. She walked deeper, counting her steps out loud so the dark wouldn't swallow her voice. 100 steps, 200, 300, crushing black. That's when she smelled it. Sulfur. Hot metal. The unmistakable scent of fire. Ayla's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought it would crack them, pulsing up through the ground like a heartbeat. She laughed out loud, this wild, broken sound that echoed forever down the tunnels. Then she started digging with her bare hands, nails split, blood frizz black on her fingertips. She dug anyway. Her fingers broke through into open space. A cavity. A pocket of air so hot it blistered her skin the instant it touched her. She tore at the hole like a mad thing until it was big enough to squeeze through. And when she did, she tumbled into a heated geothermal chamber 30 feet below the mine. The heat hit her like a wall. Steam exploded against her face. The walls glowed dull red from cracks laced with molten rock. A hot spring bubbled in the center, throwing up clouds of sulfur steam that smelled like hell. It opened a door and invited her in. Ayla tore off her frozen parka and screamed at the top of her lungs, not in pain, but in pure, delirious victory. She was right. The underground fire was real. She spent the first night curled naked beside the spring, letting the heat bake the cold out of her bones, whispering thank you, thank you, thank you to whatever ancient thing lived beneath the earth and had chosen her. She fell asleep smiling, and that should have been the end. Ayla Naklinuk should have lived the rest of her life alone down there, warm and mad and happy, while the village forgot her name. But 3 days later, something happened that no one, not even Ayla, could have predicted, because 3 days later, her 6-year-old little sister Nuna followed her footprints through the blizzard and walked straight into the same mine barefoot, holding nothing but a rad doll and crying Ayla's name into the dark. And Ayla heard her dot from 30 feet underground. Through solid rock, she heard her baby sister crying. Part 2. If this has you hooked right now, smash that like button and type "don't stop" in the comments, because what happens next is going to shatter everything you think you know about. Cold about survival and about love, Nuna Naklinuk was the opposite of her sister in every way. Where Ayla was pale and wild, Nuna was dark-eyed, quiet, always hiding behind her mother's legs. She had never once claimed to hear the earth breathing. She hated the dark. She cried every time the northern lights came out because she said they looked like ghosts. But she loved Ayla more than anything in the world. When the men came back from the exile and said Ayla was gone forever, Nuna stopped talking. Completely. For 3 days she sat on the sea ice staring at the horizon where the sled tracks had vanished, clutching her doll so tight its button eye popped off. On the third night, the temperature plunged to -43, the coldest ever recorded in Kivalina. The dogs refused to leave their houses. The ocean itself made cracking sounds like gunshots as it froze deeper. And sometime after midnight, Nuna stood up in the middle of the crowded one-room cabin, walked to the door while everyone slept, opened it, and stepped outside wearing nothing but her nightgown and bare feet. No one noticed she was gone until morning. By then her footprints were already half filled with drifting snow, leading inland, leading straight toward the Lucky Friday mine. Back underground, Ayla was changing. The heat had done something to her. Her skin, once frostbitten black in places, had healed overnight into something pale and luminous, almost glowing. Her hair, which had been hacked short with a bone knife before the exile, had grown 6 inches in 3 days, black and shiny as seal oil. To fish out rocks for her fire ring, she sang constantly now old Inupiaq songs her grandmother taught her, but the words kept twisting into something older, something that hurt to hear. And then she heard the crying. At first she thought it was the wind. Then she thought it was the fire spirit playing tricks. But the crying kept getting closer, echoing down the main shaft, getting weaker, until finally a tiny voice, cracked and raw, from screaming, floated into the geothermal chamber. Ella. I'm cold. I can't find you.
Ayla shot to her feet so fast she cracked her head on the low ceiling. Blood poured down her face, hot as the spring water. She scrambled up the narrow crawl space she had dug, clawing with fingers that no longer bled, screaming Nuna's name until her throat bled instead. She burst into the main tunnel just as Nuna collapsed. The little girl was blue. Literally blue. Frostbite. She was minutes from death. Ayla scooped her up and ran. Not walked, ran, back through the crawl space. sliding down the dirt chute into the geothermal chamber, clutching her sister so tight she heard ribs creak. The heat hit Nuna like a furnace blast. She convulsed once, vomited ice crystals, then went limpala later on the warm rocks and did the only thing she could think of. She pressed her own body against her sister's frozen one and commanded the underground fire to save her. Out loud, screamed it. You called me here. You wanted me? Now take my heat and give it to her. Cake it all if you have to. Just don't let her die. And something answered. The ground trembled. But it didn't. Instead, the steam wrapped around the sisters like a blanket, thick and golden, smelling of sulfur and something sweet, like burning birch. Color began returning to Nuna's cheeks. Ayla sobbed so hard she couldn't see, her face whispering every lullaby she knew. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time stopped making sense down there. Eventually, Nuna opened her eyes. The first thing she said was, "You were right. The ground is warm." The second thing she said was, "I'm thirsty." Alla laughed until she cried again. She scooped hot mineral water in her tin cup, cooled it between her palms, and helped Nuna drink. Then she fed her tiny pieces of the seal flipper that had thawed and cooked itself on the rocks. Nuna ate like she hadn't eaten in years. For 2 weeks, the sisters lived in that hidden paradise beneath the world. They bathed in the spring every day. They slept curled together on beds of warm stones. Taught Nuna the songs the fire had. Nuna taught Alla how to braid hair again. They played games, chasing each other's shadows on the glowing walls, splashing in water that steamed in the air, laughing so loud the earth laughed with them. And slowly, Nuna began to change. To daughter frostbitten feet healed without scars. Her hair grew just as fast as Isla's, and one day she walked across rocks that would have melted boot rubber, completely barefoot. Without flinching, Ayla watched her little sister dance through the steam and realized the fire hadn't just... The temperature above ground began to rise. A Chinook wind blew in from the south, an unnatural warm front in the middle of February. The village. Elders panicked. They said it was the curse coming true, that Ayla's evil spirit was melting the world. They decided someone had to go check the mine, make sure the demon child was really dead. 4 men volunteered, armed with rifles and holy water and fear, thick enough to choke on. They reached the Lucky Friday mine at dusk and found the entrance completely uncovered. The boards that had sealed it for 26 years were ripped away and stacked neatly to the side. Fresh, barefoot prints. 1. And the snow around the entrance was melted in a perfect circle 50 feet wide. The men stared at each other. One of them pissed himself. Then they heard it. Laughter, children's laughter echoing up from the depths of the earth. Bright and clear and happy. The men turned and ran. They didn't stop until they reached Kivalina. And that night, something walked out of the blizzard and into the village. 2 little girls, barefoot in -40, holding hands, skin glowing like they were lit from within, steam rising off their bodies in waves. The entire village gathered in the snow, mouths open, unable to speak. Alla and Nuna stopped in the center of the circle of people who had banished them, and smiled. Then Alla spoke, and her voice carried the sound of underground rivers of fire. "We're home," she said. "We brought the warmth with us." She pressed her barefoot to the permafrost, and the snow for 30 yards in every direction melted instantly into warm. Wet grass. Spring arrived in Kivalina that night. In February at 40 below, part 3. If you're still here, comment underground fire right now because this ending is going to live in your head forever. The village never exiled anyone again. They built a new cabin for Alla and Nuna right over the spot where the grass grew. It's the warmest spot in town. People came from hundreds of miles to touch the ground that refused to freeze. Scientists tried to drill for geothermal vents and hit solid rock that bled heat like blood. The sisters grew up healthy, happy, and barefoot year-round. Fishermen swore that when the aurora danced especially bright, you could see 2 small glowing figures dancing with it, far out on the sea ice, untouched by cold. But the biggest twist, the one that still makes elders whisper when the wind howls, happened 23 years later, in 1991, the Lucky Friday mine collapsed completely. A massive earthquake no one felt above ground swallowed every tunnel, every shaft, every trace of the geothermal chamber that had saved them. When the village sent a team to investigate, they found nothing but cold, ordinary rock, no heat, no steam, no glowing cracks, just a single message carved deep into the stone where the hot spring used to be. Letters burned into solid granite by something hotter than any torch. We kept our promise. Now keep yours. Love the fire. Alla and Nuna lived to be very old women. They never wore shoes. Not once. Even when they were 90, their feet were smooth and pink as a child's. And on the night they both passed, within minutes of each other, the temperature in Kivalina rose 30 degrees in an hour. The sea ice cracked from shore to horizon. Flowers. Actual flowers bloomed overnight on the tundra. The morning after the funeral, the entire village woke to find perfect barefoot prints leading from the sisters' cabin all the way to the water's edge, where they simply stopped. No return prints, just 2 sets of bare feet walking into the Arctic Ocean and vanishing beneath the waves that steamed and boiled for hours afterward. Some say, if you go to Kivalina on the coldest night of the year and lie flat on the warm spot where their cabin used to stand, you can still hear them. 2 little girls, laughing, playing somewhere deep beneath the earth, where the underground fire keeps them forever. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the northern lights ripple green and gold across the sky, you can see them dancing barefoot on top of the ocean itself, leaving trails of open water and steam behind them like footprints made of summer. So the next time someone tells you you're crazy for believing in something no one else can see, remember underground fire. Remember that sometimes the entire world can be wrong, and sometimes the warmth you need has been waiting beneath your feet all along. If you're brave enough to listen, this story is one of the wildest I've ever told. If it gave you chills, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because next week I'm dropping an even darker one about a man who checked into an Antarctic research station, and discovered every single scientist had already been dead for 30 years. You won't want to miss it. See you in the dark.